Another day, another President Trump feud. This time, the president is fuming at the Wall Street Journal and Fox News, two right-leaning media outlets.
Fox News released a survey that showed Trump's approval numbers were underwater on every issue except immigration. In response, Trump took to Truth Social and wrote, "Rupert Murdoch has told me for years that he is going to get rid of his Fox News Trump-hating fake pollster, but he has never done so. This pollster has gotten me and MAGA wrong for years. Also, and while he's at it, he should start making changes to the China-loving Wall Street Journal. It sucks."
The Wall Street Journal has indeed been critical of some of Trump's moves in the recent past. Most recently, the journal's editorial board wrote an article titled "A Moment of Truth in Ukraine." The board said that the administration made a cardinal error when it comes to dealing with Vladimir Putin, and that, quote, "Mr. Trump can't want his legacy to be handing Ukraine to Mr. Putin." Another Murdoch-owned paper, the New York Post, also criticised Trump on their front page today. Trump had told Putin to stop after the latter attacked Kyiv. I'm sure we both have much to say about this. Amber, let me just begin by defending Fox News pollsters. The polling at Fox News has been very, very good for a very long time. And the reason I lead off with that point is that I have lost count of the number of times on social media or elsewhere where I have quoted a Fox News poll and people from the Liberal side have been like, "It's Fox News." The polling unit is, as far as I can tell, untainted by any ideological tilt at all. It was almost exactly bang on in the last election. The most recent, or the closest Fox poll to the election had Trump winning by 2 points in the popular vote. He won by 1.5, so you can't get much better than that. Their polling unit is extremely good, and he's just annoyed because it has findings right now that aren't particularly beneficial to him.
Yeah, I think that's right. And this is sort of classic Trump. If people seem to be attacking him, he will attack back. This is classic. I don't think it matters whether the outlet is right-wing coded or whether it's left-wing. If they write something that's negative about him or his agenda, he will respond. But going to a broader point, I remember we talked about this, maybe it was a couple of months ago, maybe a few weeks, about Trump attacking a Fox News reporter. And I brought up the point that Fox News and Trump have not always had the most friendly relationship. I mean, sure, the outlet is right-wing, it's conservative, but it doesn't really fall in line on a lot of things with the MAGA or America First agenda, if you want to put it that way. And the Wall Street Journal, even less so than Fox News. Talking about the war in Ukraine, Fox News and the Wall Street Journal are probably far more hawkish and less anti-interventionist on foreign policy than a lot of the Republican base. The Wall Street Journal is less excited about Trump's immigration policy. They don't like the tariffs because they obviously impact, it's in the name, Wall Street. So this is not all that surprising to me. And I think it's pretty common for people who are not part of the conservative media ecosphere or even part of the conservative movement to kind of view all of conservative media as this one sort of lockstep group. But there are a lot of ideological divisions within the conservative media and ways that these outlets position themselves in relation to the Trump agenda. And I think this is further evidence of that.
I agree with some of that, specifically that there are obviously differences of outlook within the conservative media. Where I disagree with you, Amber, is that I see Fox News, particularly in the recent past, as being very broadly supportive of Trump, not only in terms of what its opinion hosts say, the Sean Hannitys and Laura Ingrams of the world, but in its framing of issues, the issues it chooses to focus on, the issues it chooses not to focus on. And I think overall its tone is extremely sympathetic to Trump. Now, even though the Wall Street Journal is owned by the same person, effectively, Rupert Murdoch, I do much more so take your point with the Wall Street Journal. And I see the Wall Street Journal, especially in its editorial pages, as sort of the voice of the old establishment Republican Party that Trump has overrun in a way. He and his MAGA people have changed that party. But the editorial line of the Wall Street Journal is very pro-free trade, often very hawkish on foreign policy. And so it has been extremely critical of Trump. Now, some of that criticism, I think, is very accurate and well-deserved. I think, for example, the Journal's editorial board wrote only in the past couple of days about the idea that it believes that China is winning this sort of game of bluff that Trump has introduced. But I do take the point that the Journal's overall view of something like trade is, as I say, more old school Republican establishment and less MAGA, and frankly less inclined to be cognizant of more working class interests or sensibility.
Yeah, I remember criticizing the Wall Street Journal back in April of 2024 for an article they wrote about the Biden border crisis, because they had this box in the middle of the article that was basically trying to undermine a lot of the talking points that Trump puts out on immigration or that his supporters agree with. One of which was sort of praising the Biden administration for having this CBP-1 app that allowed migrants to check in, but it didn't mention that if they don't check in, the administration can't track them. They also didn't mention in a paragraph about the killer of Laken Riley that he was someone who wasn't checking in for his immigration scheduled meetings, and that was part of the reason why he was able to run free and be moved from New York down to Atlanta and ultimately commit that murder. And they also repeated this line about how, and I have it right here in front of me, decades of research has found that immigrants are less likely than native-born Americans to commit crimes, which has a number of issues with it. It conflates legal immigration with illegal immigration, and the statistics about that are a bit complicated because tracking illegal immigrant crime is very difficult. The only state that has ever really done it in full is Texas, and the Center for Immigration Studies has pointed out a lot of issues with this sort of commonly accepted quote-unquote fact, which is that they often undercount the number of illegal immigrants entering the court system because they only count ones who have had prior fingerprinting done by the Department of Homeland Security, and they also weren't counting people who were not immediately identified as illegal aliens when they were picked up for crimes, and a lot of them were only identified as such later in the legal process. So when I see articles like that, it's a reminder, I think, of the corporate interests of places like the Wall Street Journal, which is really counter to a lot of the working class-oriented commentary or arguments that come from the Trump administration and its base.
On the immigration question, I think that argument that you've just outlined is a kind of interesting one in a couple of ways, because on the one hand, I think, let's take for a second the hypothetical that people who are illegal immigrants are proportionately less likely than the citizen population to commit crimes. Let's hypothetically assume that's true. Even if that is true, I still understand the argument that they shouldn't be here in the first place. And so if someone with that status commits a serious crime, it does not in any way act as a salve to the victims of that crime to say, yes, well, that population at large commits crimes at a lower rate than the native-born population. So I get that point. I do think, though, that one of the reasons that argument is made so frequently is because of the demonization of illegal immigrants as almost inherently violent, and the kind of rhetoric that Trump uses about, even going so far as calling people terrorists more recently. That, I think, is a dangerous sort of ostracization or othering of a population that doesn't deserve that treatment. If people commit crimes, regardless of their immigration status, they should be prosecuted for those crimes.
Yeah, and the response to that would be that illegal immigrants have committed a crime by crossing the border illegally. So even if they don't commit an additional crime, then it is, I think, reasonable and acceptable to say that they should have to go home.
It is. I mean, I think that it is the due process case still emerges, and we don't want to probably relitigate the Abrego Garcia thing because you and I have spoken about it before. The objection there isn't about the government's right to deport people or not. It's that the government, in my view, well, I think it's pretty clear, defied a legitimate court order. That, however, is maybe a discussion for another day.
Up next, Speaker Mike Johnson is tired of hearing The View's co-host trashing President Trump's agenda. That's next on Rising.